I created an entire video game using only code written by ChatGPT. It was a secret project for my brother's 21st birthday, and the results will blow your mind. I've never done any coding before in my life. As a kid, I had dabbled very occasionally in Scratch and a tiny little bit of Blender's old game engine, but beyond that, I've never written a script, never taken an interest in learning a programming language. I don't have the ability to stare at text for longer than a couple of minutes. So to decide to take on the task of create a full video game for a live audience was a nerve-wracking experience. But I did do it. I started making it on January 5th and finished on November 2nd, 3 hours before it was played for the first time. But let's pause for a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I can tell you how I did it, I think it's important to tell you why I did it. I have two brothers, James and Fraser, and they are awesome. We live in New Zealand, which is where the hobbits live, and therefore we've grown up going on adventures, loving creativity, and making stuff together. And so when an opportunity arises where I get to celebrate and honor people I care about, I go all in. And a great opportunity to do that in New Zealand is a 21st birthday party. For my 21st, I organized a concert and had various friends and family play songs and perform, and it was an awesome night. When James turned 21, I spent the year creating a full-length Netflix-style documentary about his life. It took me like 9 months shooting interviews behind his back and editing it, and that was a brilliant project, one that I am super proud of. The working name while I was doing that was Project Pink, because he had a pink cap that he wore all the time. For Fraser, I didn't want to just do another doc because it wouldn't have been as special, and I wanted to make sure that it was a unique project and something that reflected him and his unique character and celebrate his life in a unique way. Fraser's always had a quieter personality. He doesn't talk too much, he's earnest and kind, and is always willing to support his family and his friends, and he has a huge servant heart. And he also just happens to love video games. So let me ask you, if I were to tell you to think of a video game where you play as a quiet, earnest, and committed character whose mission is to help others, what character comes to mind? With the project name locked in, I began my search to see if it was possible to create a video game from scratch. I searched high and low across all the interwebs for different softwares and ideas. Game Maker Studio, Godot, Godot? I don't know, RPG Maker. I had to play with all of them. I even downloaded Unity quite early on and started to follow a tutorial, but I immediately switched off when it was time to write some code. I wanted to see if I could find something that was easy and flexible. But I learned pretty quickly that when it comes to game development, your options are either easy or flexible. After quite a long time of exploring options and ideas, I felt a little bit deflated. No matter what software I picked, it seemed that I wasn't going to be able to pull this off the way that I wanted to without taking time to learn and write the code myself. Writing code is something that takes patience. Patience that I don't have. Patience that I think a lot of people don't have, even if they have really creative ideas for a game. My actual profession is creating video content. I'm used to manipulating what I see on a screen really, really quickly. And so the idea of typing in a language that's sort of mine, but not really, and having to understand it and take the time to test it and fix it along the way, it sucked the joy out of the idea really, really fast. So I took some time off and figured either the right option will come to me or I'll just change the idea. And I actually took a couple of months off working on it. 2024 arrives at a rapid pace. It feels like only yesterday it was 2021 when James was having his 21st birthday. And now this year, Fraser is. And I need to get a move on with this project, otherwise it'll fall apart and I will be disappointed in myself for not doing something as good as it could have been. I decided on a whim to revisit Unity one last time and just double check that it's definitely a no-go. What attracted me to Unity was the user interface wasn't unlike video editing software or software like Blender. You have your area for storing data, your world area, your list of items in the world, and when you click on one, you have your inspector where you can add and adjust controls and settings for different things. That all made sense to me, and the only thing that was getting in my way was that I just didn't want to write any code. After exploring some tutorials that covered the basic functionality of the software and how to do, I think it was like a Flappy Bird type game, something hit me while I was watching that. It's 2024, you have access to free software that might be able to give you the codes you need, and not only that, it could tell you how to use them in Unity straight away. So I did a test, downloaded a free sprite sheet of a dinosaur, set up a game object and the animations required just like the tutorial said, and then I asked ChatGPT to write me a code that will make the dinosaur move and jump around. I wanted it to be able to adjust its speed and its jump height. 10 seconds later, I have a code. I copied this code into a new script I created, I save it, I drag that script into the inspector of the dinosaur game object, the speed control and the height control are right there. I hit play, press my keys, and it didn't work. Nothing happened. So I tell ChatGPT, nothing happened. And it gives me a list. Try this, check this, double check this. And so I did. And once I'd done that, it worked. And I was overwhelmed because all of a sudden what felt like an impossible task became a little bit possible. I had a way into this world at my fingertips. And if I stick to this process, I might just be able to get this done the way I want it to be done. I decided right then that there was no turning back and that this would be what I commit to for the next 10 months. By the end of the project, I had done 156 days of development, which included writing 250 scripts, creating over 3,000 sprites, 1,000 animations, and I had to spend hundreds of hours talking to ChatGPT. I want to go over all the big things I learned how to do during this process, all the mistakes I made and my favorite lessons, and at the end you'll also get to see the final result and how my brother and our friends and family reacted to the game. I do want to share a few disclaimers straight up top though. Firstly, this is not a tutorial for how to use Unity. If you get confused because I've glossed over a few details of how it works, I'm very sorry about that. I just don't have the time to cover every little thing I learned from the beginning. I will link in the description some great tutorials to show you the basics. I recommend go follow one of the tutorials, and then anytime that they tell you now we're gonna write some code, just say to ChatGPT, I need the code that does this, and then copy that and see if it works. I created 8 levels for the game, and then there were some cutscenes and video scenes and mini games too. I'm only going to be focusing on the key challenges I came across while doing the levels and how I overcame them. You may be watching this and you're a programmer yourself and you'll be thinking, oh man, this guy is using terrible codes and this is a horrific build. And to that I say, sure, you're probably right. I still don't know whether this method of creating a game is an appropriate one. I have no idea if the codes are any good. I have no idea if I could have done this better. All I know is that it worked for what I needed it to do, and that's all that mattered. What you are about to see me create is grossly copyrighted. This game is filled with all sorts of pop culture references and things that aren't my own because it's a game about my brother's life, and so of course I'm going to include his favorite music and moments from his life where he watched movies or went to an AJR concert or a Disneyland ride. This makes the game unreleasable for obvious reasons, and so no, you cannot find it on Steam. I'm sorry about that, but also, of course, you can't find it on Steam. And last but not least, while watching this, you will probably go, Joel, this game looks kind of familiar. And you'd be right. So let's talk about the second most challenging part of this project, creating the artwork for the game. I do consider myself an artistic person. I have dabbled in design every now and again, and I'm not too shabby at Photoshop because I have to be okay at it for my job. So I wasn't too concerned initially about making art for the game, but that concern did start to grow pretty rapidly once I started to plan out the things I wanted to make. It ultimately came down to time versus story. Do I take the time to create fully original artwork from scratch to make my game? Or do I use assets that already exist and adapt them to tell my story? And given the amount of things that I wanted to try and put into this game, I decided to go with the latter. Stardew Valley is one of the best games I've ever played. It's probably like my third favorite game of all time behind Outer Wilds and Zelda. So one day I'm playing Stardew Valley with my wife, and it occurs to me, hey, maybe this artwork is available somewhere for me to use, at least as sort of a starting point to get this project started. And lo and behold, I was right. everything was online. There were literally hundreds of things I could use as a starting point. So I could take a couch and turn it into a couch in my parents' house. Or I could take one of the characters like Demetrius and use them as a base for creating my dad in 2003. I used software called Aseprite for my artwork. It's basically Photoshop for pixel art, and it was fantastic. And over time, I was getting more and more comfortable with the tools, and I was able to start building things from references only. Now, obviously, if you intend on developing a game for distribution, you'll need to create your things from scratch, or use free things. But when you're just getting started, using quality things like Stardew Valley sprites is a great way to help speed up your learning process. And then later you can go back and remake and redesign things in the game to be fully original work. But for this, a Stardew Valley styled game was the perfect way to tell the story I wanted to tell anyway. So I want to thank Concerned Ape for creating such a wonderful game, and please Stardew fans, don't come at me. I'm on your side, I swear. So we have our method and plan for making the game, and we have our chosen art style to go along with it. But before I can get started on the game, I need to figure out what it actually is going to be. What is the story? What levels will there be? What happens in those levels? This changed over the course of the game, particularly as the deadline approached and I needed to start simplifying some things. But the overall story is that Fraser is hanging out at home one day when he gets zapped into a strange underground lair thing, and a mysterious character that looks like Dr. Doofenshmirtz tells him that his timeline is under threat by the unnamed bad guys. He needs to go through his timeline and live out different moments in his life to win the game. Awesome. Great premise. Super easy, a little stupid, maybe, but worked for this. In each level, he gets a little bit older. The levels included activities he would do as a child in our family homes, vacations we went on, things he would do at school, and then it was all dramatized. At school, the kids turn into zombies, and at Disneyland, his stuffed toy comes to life and starts destroying the castle like King Kong. And the football field gets filled with cows you have to avoid. And our favorite beach in New Zealand where we live is Split Apple Rock, because of this awesome rock that's naturally split in half. And so that comes to life in one of the levels too. So yeah, that's what it became, and I loved writing it, and I loved coming up with the concepts. But the thing I loved most of all was having ChatGPT do the code, because it meant that I could come up with an idea and have a full code ready to try within minutes to see if it would achieve what I wanted, which kind of felt like a superpower. It gave me so much more time to focus on the narrative and the creativity, which was just awesome.
In the first level, Fraser is a very small baby walking around this house, and he has different tasks to do. At the same time, his family are patrolling the hallways, and if you get caught by one of these NPCs, you have to start the level again, and the goal is to try and get through the whole list without getting caught by the family. This was the first level I tried to make, and so my very first task was to try and get this little baby to walk. And so I opened up ChatGPT and I said, I've never used Unity before, I really need to get this baby walking, what do I do? It just gave me some instructions and I started to follow along, and at the beginning I said to it a lot that it needed to give me more information and more context because it was glossing over a lot of things. So I used a combination of ChatGPT and tutorials to kind of talk me through a lot of the operational stuff. Because this is a pixel art game, the sprite mode was typically set to multiple, 16 pixels per unit. The filter mode was set to point, there was no compression. Then I'd open up the sprite editor and I'd take all my little slices and put them all together, and this is all stuff that became habit over time. But at the beginning I was very slow and very confused, but I stuck at it and continued to follow the instructions slowly and carefully. And so it talked me through all sorts of stuff, from creating animation clips and tying those to an animator, then creating the transitions for those animations and the different parameters for the animator. And then it explained that I needed things like rigid bodies and box colliders and stuff that didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time, but the more I used them, it started to make more sense over time. And eventually I started to get some movement and some interesting stuff happening, but there was also a lot of really weird things that happened, particularly around physics and having to understand physics. Also, I found learning to tie animations to characters was quite confusing at the start, and I had to watch a number of different tutorials to give me the right ideas. But eventually I was able to sort of explain to ChatGPT, here's how I've set up the animations. Now please keep that in mind while you're writing the walking code, and then it would respond quite positively to that and give me exactly what I was after. One of the things that I initially thought would be quite challenging was the sort of 3D illusions amongst the 2D environment. Having the characters walk in front of objects and behind objects and creating this sort of effect to suggest that it's in a sort of 3D space. So what I did was I made sure that the character's physical collider box was just around its feet, and I also made sure with any object in the scene that the physical collider box was sort of the shape of the base. In this example, we have this piano. I dragged this polygon collider around sort of the floor of the piano. And so that was step one. But then after that, I spent quite a while talking to ChatGPT about how do I make it so that when the baby is standing above the piano, it's technically behind the piano in the layering system. And when it's below the piano, it's in front of the piano in the layering system. And initially, ChatGPT was quite specific, going, okay, well, here's some code that you can implement into your movement code. But I wanted to be able to apply this sort of dynamic layering thing across any of these game objects. And so to achieve this, I had to explain to it that I needed to create a singular script that focuses on just this method, and then I will apply that to any object in the scene that I wish. This was an important lesson that I learned at the time. I don't know if it's a universally good lesson, but in the context of what I was trying to create here, small scripts worked better. Having small scripts that focused on a particular idea and focus worked a lot better than trying to create one really long script, which at the very beginning of this process, I was doing quite a bit of. And it made things get really, really messy, especially if ChatGPT hallucinated and forgot parts of the code. It would then create quite a few problems for me. So I learned as time went on that small scripts work better. Do a script for the walking, do a script for any interactions, do a script for the dynamic layering. Do smaller scripts as much as you can, especially if you're just getting started with this sort of code development. Talking to ChatGPT through small scripts will help you pick up the basics a lot quicker. I'm sure for many games, as they get more complex and comprehensive, all the scripts would get much more complicated too, but in the context of what we have going on here, small scripts were definitely the way to go. So beyond creating code, ChatGPT also did a really good job at talking me through how to operate Unity generally. Obviously, the scripts are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but there is some stuff that I was able to get a pretty firm grip on and understand quite fast. Those things being timelines, colliders, prefabs, and particle systems. And these four things were way more in my wheelhouse of expertise. My background in animation work and visual effects definitely gave me the leg up here. Pretty much every scene I make starts with an opening timeline and a closing timeline, and then a good chunk of the levels have little interactive timelines where the character will walk up into the circle collider, and then when you click inside it, it triggers a little animation of some kind. And then it was really great to be able to kind of take my prior knowledge of some of these elements and then communicate to ChatGPT what I needed so that it could give me the leg up in the things that I didn't understand. So for example, in this Disneyland level, I wanted Fraser to be able to shoot fireworks from his hands, Phantasmic style, I suppose you could say. So I designed a particle system that I liked. It was pretty simple. And then I said to ChatGPT that I wanted this character to be able to shoot these particles out of it. So the rule needed to be that if I ever clicked, that the character would trigger its animation for firing, and then it would spawn a prefab that had a particle system attached to it, and that particle system would fire towards wherever the cursor was. And it's been a little while since I revisited this, but I'm pretty sure that ChatGPT figured this one out fairly smoothly. The main thing that sort of needed tweaking was the particle settings after the code had been set up. The particle system component is quite involved. There is lots and lots of options and things you can play with. And so it's a lot of fun, turning each thing on and off and seeing how it all works. There were a couple of times where I definitely got stuck or I wanted to achieve a certain thing, and I could have gone to a tutorial, I'm sure, but I just found it just as easy to say to ChatGPT, hey, where would I find the tool that gives me this? So for example, I may have said to it, I want these particles to have kind of a colored streak behind them. How do I achieve that? And ChatGPT would go, yep, you can find that in the trails setting. Here's how you might set that up. So super handy to just have a little automated tutorial system where I can ask it any question and it gives me a good answer 80% of the time. So one of these levels is a treasure hunting level where You walk around talking to different people, and they all have different items they're looking for, and you have to go and find those items elsewhere. I was pretty nervous going into this level that it was going to be quite complex. There were a number of different interactions that I wanted to create, but I was pretty blown away to discover that pretty much everything was able to be created by one single code. I asked ChatGPT to write me a code that would be attached to a circle collider. When you walk into the collider, it starts to activate game objects. In the case of most of these scripts, it would activate lines of dialogue. And then at the end of its list of objects to activate, it would then activate and deactivate any other game objects provided in the inspector. So super straightforward. I was really stoked with this particular line of code just because it was so easy to apply it across so many different levels and have it work for so many different little narrative points that I needed. A good example of this is Fraser walks over to his friend Josh. When you click, Josh says he's lost his trumpet. After you finish this conversation with him, the game object that helps you interact with that trumpet switches on. Then you can go to the trumpet, pick it up. Once you've picked up the trumpet, the next interaction you can have with Josh becomes available and switches on. Really simple logic, but it was incredible to me how many times during this process, the solution for creating a system in the game was simply dependent on what game objects are switched on and what game objects are switched off. Another script that follows a very similar style of thinking is this one here that tracks how many of these game objects are turned on. And once all of these game objects are switched on, it activates another game object of my choice. So this is really great for showing the player that they've finished a level. So yeah, the power of activating and deactivating game objects, very important in a narrative-based level. I think, maybe. Maybe this is a bad way to do it, I'm not sure. Worked for me though. One of the things that I had no concept of going into game development was the console. This tab that would send little messages with varying degrees of urgency to explain problems that it was having in a language that was English, but not something that I could interpret. But luckily, ChatGPT knew exactly what the console was talking about the whole way through. So while I was testing, anytime that we'd get an error, I would simply copy that error, paste it into ChatGPT, and it would explain to me what the problem is. And for the most part, this process for debugging felt pretty smooth. I can say with a pretty high level of confidence that it was able to identify what the problems were, maybe even 100% of the time. Let's go 98% because there's no absolutes. But it was really, really good at identifying what the issue was. When it comes to actually fixing those problems though, I would say it delivered successful results 85% of the time. And it's that other 15% that you really got to look out for when using ChatGPT to create code. There were some days where ChatGPT would make a mistake that I didn't notice, and it would cost me a significant amount of extra time to get it fixed. And what I'm talking about here mostly is to do with hallucinations. Something that's been pretty common with ChatGPT for a while is it can quite easily lose track of the conversation. And particularly while you're developing code, if you're creating quite a long script and having quite a long conversation with ChatGPT about it, it could after a while start to forget some of the original things that you wanted in the code, and it could just completely forget it. And if you don't pay attention to that when copying over code, then you can lose stuff, and then you go and ask it, this piece of the code's now gone, what happened? And it goes, oops, I forgot about it. And that sucks. That really, really sucked anytime that happened. If you ask ChatGPT to provide you a code in full, like I did regularly, double check that everything is there before you copy and paste. I was obviously stoked to be able to use natural English language to communicate my needs to this AI software and then get pretty good results most of the time. However, even natural English language could only go so far sometimes, and the best example of where this became quite troublesome was the football level. Think about all the things that are going on in a FIFA football game, and then think about all the steps and things that you'd need to try and communicate to ChatGPT when you want to translate FIFA-style gameplay to a Stardew Valley-styled 2D game. There are so many little mechanics and physics and this was by far the most challenging level to make. I ended up having to do quite a few compromises to get it across the line. There was one thing in particular that was so confusing and took me forever to figure out. And then once I did figure it out, I thought it was just hilarious. And that was passing the ball. All I wanted was for the player to be able to pass the ball to its closest teammate. That's it. And I told ChatGPT this. Make the player pass the ball to the closest teammate. And it told me that it would do that. But when I went to test that, it was not working. And I told it wasn't working. And it created debugs in the code so we could figure out why it wasn't working. And none of those debugs showed up. I was confused. ChatGPT was clearly confused as well. I had to sit on this for a couple of weeks. And then one day, it occurred to me, maybe the reason it's not passing to the closest teammate is simply because the closest teammate is the player that's already got the ball. So then I asked ChatGPT to change the code so that the ball gets passed to the second closest teammate. And with that small change, it worked immediately. And I sat there and I think I probably laughed for like 10 minutes at the stupidity. And this is a great example, I think, of where there is still a bit of a shortfall in terms of being able to communicate what we have in our brains to the system and then get the result we're after. I'm sure this is only going to get better over time. It's been over a year since I started working on that football level. Even a year later, ChatGPT is way more sophisticated. But it's just something to be wary of while working through this. If you've got a complex idea, obviously you want to break it down into simple steps, but beyond that, you may also need to do some trickery or rethink how you communicate ideas to get them across the line. Something that evolved over time was my prompt structure and the way that I requested code. At the beginning of the process, I knew absolutely nothing, and so I would say to ChatGPT straight up, I don't know what to ask you, I just need this to happen, talk me through it. And that meant that the process was definitely slower because I had to learn a lot more about the fundamentals. Once I had done 10 months of this though, there were a lot of things that I was able to kind of mold into my prompts to make sure that I get specific and accurate results for the things I was after. The biggest thing that changed was I was able to understand most of the fundamental information that I needed to provide ChatGPT, because it's all about giving context. Here's the context for the game object. Here's the information about what kind of colliders or other components it might have. Here's the list of public floats that I need. Here's the tag, and here's the sorting layer. Anything that may have been useful or relevant to create the code. I was able to eventually give all of that information to ChatGPT straight away to create a script, instead of just being like, well, I needed to do this, and I don't know what I'm doing. So going back to the football level, as an example, one day I may have said to ChatGPT something like, I need a Unity script for my 2D game titled football_NPC_relationship. Public floats I need, a list of game objects that are the teammates, running speed, smoothness, distance to keep from the other players. The rules are to have the NPCs run around but maintain a suitable distance from teammates. Chase the football, which is tagged interactable. From that, GPT has quite a bit of information it can process, and then spit out a pretty clean and accurate code. And sure, there'll be things that need tweaking, and maybe I haven't given it everything, but this process of figuring out what's things to anticipate it's going to want to know was really helpful for getting me codes faster and developing the game quicker. The other method that I developed over time was the incremental code development process, or ICDP, which I made up just now. And all this is essentially any time that I wanted to develop something that I didn't really know how to develop, I would go little bit by little bit as opposed to trying to get everything to happen at once. So I might say, I need this character to walk, and it would create a walking code. And then I would say, now I need it to jump. And then it would add the jumping code in. And then I would say, now I need it to do a double jump. And along the way, I would build that in piece by piece. So this was really handy for when I was creating a Smash Brothers mini game that comes at the very end of this whole game. And I had all of these great little animations, but I wanted to be very careful with making sure that the code was really clean and simple. And so I started with just the running, and then I asked it to add in a jumping animation, and then add in ground pound, and then add in punching, and over time develop this little character. So yeah, while I still wouldn't consider myself a game developer per se, just because the way that I've done this obviously doesn't feel particularly authentic, there's still so much about the language of Unity and developing games generally that I picked up over time. And yeah, I just loved being able to provide information to ChatGPT like I knew what I was talking about. And even, every now and again, pick up mistakes that ChatGPT had made. It didn't happen too often, but there were a couple of times where it would spit out a piece of code, and because I was so used to staring at code at this point, there were a few times where I'd identify something and go, nope, you've done this wrong, you've missed a public float, you've forgotten about this, and then I would curse at it, and it would go, I'm sorry, here's the real code. I'd really love to go over just really quickly some of my favorite moments or things that I achieved or made happen that just made me really happy. My whole family absolutely loves Disneyland. When Fraser went for the first time, I think he was like 8 or 9 years old. So I was super excited to recreate some of those locations and rides. And some of it, not gonna lie, ended up looking a bit messy because this is one of the levels that I did a fair bit later and I didn't quite get as much time as I would have liked to work on the artwork, but I managed to do enough of it for it to be convincing. Piloting through an asteroid field, or hitting the different targets in Midway Mania, figuring out with ChatGPT how to achieve those sorts of mechanics was just a blast. I had just the best time. Another level that I really enjoyed creating an environment for was this beach level. And once I kind of had the core mechanics down of building the sandcastle, everything else was just set dressing, and I absolutely loved that. Creating these little timelines that made boats go by in a sort of looping pattern and seagulls flying overhead. Having the time to kind of work on all those little extra details just made the whole thing feel like magic, and I thought it was so fun. Also, one morning I just decided I'd throw Mario Kart into the game, and that ended up being surprisingly easy. As in, I finished most of the mechanics for the Mario Kart race in 2 or 3 hours one morning. And I just thought that was kind of hilarious that I was able to get a couple of codes down and ChatGPT was able to talk me through how to set it up. I did run out of time to get the items working, but if you need to take a shortcut, sometimes the best way to achieve that is to slap on a meme and call it a day.
Psychic!
There were other little moments where something would be created that I just thought was total magic. An example being this little tracing mini game that I created was just one code that controlled the whole system. And I thought that was excellent. And then there were some other things, like in this little Minecraft mini game, where I was really pushing the limit of the software to see how many prefabs it would spawn before it caused too many problems. And I felt like I was pushing it to its limit, but I probably wasn't. It was probably handling it just fine, but I loved how messy it looked and it was really funny. And finally, Fraser loves showing us memes, and so I thought it would be really funny for one of the levels for him to just walk around showing his family different memes that he's found on Reels or TikTok. And so figuring out how to get a little phone to show up and a video to play was another challenge that, honestly, the way I achieved that is gone from my mind. I can't remember it all, but I did do it and it was great, and I thought it was really funny too.
After months of arguing with AI, staring at individual pixels, working with colliders and particle systems and audio and debugging, the birthday was here and the game was not ready. But it was ready enough. I dragged my desktop down to the venue. I did a full last-minute playthrough, fixed up some bugs that had come up while I was testing that. And at some point, you've just gotta let it go, trust that it'll be enough, and enjoy the evening.
Hello everybody, I'm going to find my speech here. I've titled it, Frasely makes the girls go crazily.
I do think I have a pretty good opening line. Fraser, let down your hair. 21 years I've been a fan of this guy, and not many of you can say that, you fakers. Fraser, you are the man. You're the cutest kid. You're absolutely adorable to hang out with. Thank you for just doing everything I told you.
Fraser has always had the best birthday parties, and they always consist of Mario... What's that Mario jumping game? Smash Bros! That's the one! We're always at Smash Bros, and there was always lots of fish and chips and things there as well.
When we go to the beach as a family, we love to build a fort. And then we dig a moat, and then we build a wall, and then we wait for the tide to come in, and we see how well we've done. And then sometimes when the water is getting particularly close, maybe after it's knocked down a wall or two, we do what we call a sacrifice. like from the Bible. We lay down in front of the castle and we blocked the waves from hitting it. Fraser was always the first one who was keen to get down there and sacrifice himself.
Thank you for all the work that you did for me when you were a student and I was making you do stuff at school. In particular, a lot of tech work where he would be picking up the jobs that nobody else wanted to do.
He was such a heart to serve, and he would often be caught bunking classes. Where are you, Fraser? Oh, I was busy packing up the tech team. I was taking the cart to the jazz band in the quad, making sure the jazz band was all there to they can do their performance or whatever. So Fraser was always had such a heart of service, and I think that's a big thing that brought a lot of our short films to life. He'd always just throw it off his shoulder like it was nothing, but it was often a lot of effort put into doing good stuff. So thanks, Fraser, for being a good mate. One of my best mates towards the end of high school as well, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you more.
When Fraser was about 4 years old, we'd have a bedtime routine, and part of it I would say to him, "I love you to the moon and back." And Fraser would say, "Well, I love you to the moon and back, and to the moon and back, and to the moon and back." And so it would go on. On the first day of school, there was a girl being pulled around by a boy on the playground, and she was not happy. So Fraser went in and got in between the two of them, pulled them apart, which I thought was a very bold thing to do on your first day of school. And whenever someone's unwell, he always follows up asking me, "How are they doing now?" He's got a very caring heart. You're very strong, dependable, and you're very resilient. And I'm very proud of the young man that you've become.
There's a number of things about you, Fraser, I wish I was more like. And this is just not an admiration thing. It's like, man, at your age I wish I was like that. And I love seeing the world through your eyes. At times it is beautifully uncomplicated and uncluttered. You know, when there's a great song, there's a line or two that really sticks out. It kind of lands, you know, that kind of thing in a good song. Jeff's song, he sings, "I do the best with what I'm dealt, played my cards with these two hands, that's how I'm made, it's who I am." When I think of you, Fraser, that song really lights up for me. You do the best with what you've been dealt, you play your cards with your two hands, it's how you're made, it's who you are. There's no doubt, Fraser, that you've been dealt a hand that has some challenges, and yet that has never stopped you. You've worked hard, you're one of the hardest workers I know. You don't complain. Well, not those.
Fraser's just the loyalist guy I've ever known. If you need him for anything, he's there for you, not a complaint in sight, as everyone has said tonight. I think we're all pretty lucky to have someone like him in our lives. At this age, it becomes harder and harder to keep people in your life, you know, to have a good group of people around you. Friends move away and life gets busy, and if any of us in here ever had a sandcastle that we needed protected, I know that Fraser would be there for you.
Man, I could keep thanking you forever, but the main thing that I wanted to recognize is that you do life to the fullest. Even in the simple stuff, you do it well. You do it very well, and you should be proud of it. 3 years ago, James turned 21. I did the biggest project that I've ever done, and so he's every now and again, "Hey, so my 21st is coming up, and how long is the thing going to be," and all that. Firstly, I am so happy that you knew. There's no way that I wouldn't do something for you. Like, I'm so glad that you had that sort of trust in me. However, I wasn't going to do another documentary. I needed to find something that was uniquely Fraser. And so tonight, you're all welcome to experience something that is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I finished it about 3 hours ago. This obviously took a lot of work and was way out of my comfort zone. And so, if you see something and you're like, "That's wrong," you can tell me later. How's that sound?
We've got some really exciting news. Tell little baby James.
Yo! Oh my goodness.
That is not the point at all.
She said hi, Fraser.
My biggest fear was that the game would fire up and then something would go wrong straight away. And that's exactly what happened.
Look at that tree.
Oh no. I'll just tell you what they said. They said, hey, how's it going?
And this is why when creating games you need to have lots and lots of playthroughs and lots of different people try it out, try it on different devices, and I'm still not sure to this day why it chose to glitch out the moment it did, because I couldn't replicate it later, but it was a good lesson for me in that sometimes you can do your best to cover everything and things still may not work out perfectly. And you have to be okay with that and you have to let it go.
We're just going to quickly run over to these guys again and see if I can trigger it naturally.
I got the game back on track for him and we pressed on as if that glitch didn't happen.
Is this Dr. Doof Surprise? Alright, it is.
Fraser. Okay, Betty. Welcome to the world.
He still reacts like this.
So the first level kicks off and it's going great, but it becomes apparent pretty quickly that I have played this game a lot. For a first time player, this first level is not very easy. Luckily, the audience loved it every time Fraser got caught, but I was super worried that we weren't going to get very far through this game before it was everyone's bedtime. So at some point I just had to give him a hint.
Yo, fire roll. Yes. Yes, I will.
Hard to know just where it starts, how it grows. It's the magic that we call life. It's the stardust that I
Oh, yes!
Terrible mistake. Stardew and this road's fire.
Throughout the rest of the gameplay, the only other main glitch that came up every now and again was text for some reason. Sometimes he would pull up the to-do list and instead of it saying life stuff, it would just say E. But besides that, I was absolutely stoked with this run through. Every cutscene worked, every little detail and moment that I wanted to be noticed got noticed. One of the highlights for the crowd was definitely the football level. So I'm really glad I committed to that one. It was by far the most complex to design, and I did almost decide to cut it completely, but it ended up being well worth it. Another big moment was the Mario Kart minigame. Everyone was pretty shocked by that. I think it was because the move to a 3D environment was so unexpected. And once it was all said and done, there was one final surprise at the very end.
Well done, Fraser.
Dog. What? How?
Like Agatha, it has been me all along. And I just want to say, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Fraser. I don't know how to pronounce. Happy birthday to you. And many more. So apparently, you had a whole video game about your life, and you finally finished it. And then you just found out it was me. I'm sorry if that is disappointing to you. Alright, bye-bye. Stay evil. Happy birthday. And happy birthday from me, too. I hope you have a great one.
Phineas and Ferb, man. Great show. Thank you very much to Dan Povelmeyer for sending that through. It was the cherry on top that really made this experience a special one. I think saying that Project Link was a success is a huge understatement. I was incredibly proud that evening of the work. I really felt like Fraser knew he was loved and valued, and I was just so happy to have pulled off something that was uniquely him. I don't know if I'll ever make another video game, but I'm excited to know that if I ever want to try something else, something new, there are now tools out there that are going to open doors for me that I didn't think were possible. And I can't wait to open those doors and maximize every opportunity I have to try new things. The following day, I posted to the OpenAI Reddit a preview of the game, and I explained how all the coding was done using GPT and that it took me months, but the result was awesome. I got lots of questions. How'd you do this thing? What techniques did you use for building this and that, and so on? And something I noticed while reflecting on my answers was how much of a blur the experience has become. If someone was to say to me, I want to set up dialogue boxes in a Unity project, what do the canvas settings need to be? I wouldn't be able to immediately answer because my memory of doing that isn't me researching and digesting information, it's me just talking to GPT and getting the answer. And so therefore, every memory I have of making this game is kind of the same thing, which makes answering questions about it really hard. And I thought that was really interesting. It begs this question, even though I made this game, did I really learn anything? Or did I just simply copy someone else's answers to the test? Is this method of learning going to be net positive or net negative for our future? Will we excel with these tools, or will we just sort of become like the people in WALL-E, using technology to entertain and inform us when we feel like it, but not spending any real time doing the grunt work to really learn the thing? At the moment, I'm not worried. This project is a great example of something net positive. And since finishing the game, there have been so many other things that I've thought of doing, which I can totally see GPT giving me the leg up I'd need for it to also be successful. I think ultimately it comes down to two ideas. The first one is, we as a species communicate through natural language. So any technology that can interpret us well and demonstrate its understanding of us is an exciting thing to have, and we should maximize how we use it. And then the second thing is, ultimately, whether GPT is good for the world or bad for the world will come down to how people choose to use it. And I suppose how the government chooses to regulate it a little bit. So consider for yourself, how can you use this tool to maximize the love you have for others and the desire you have to see a better world? Hey, if you made it to the end, congratulations, thanks for sticking around. I have a link in the description to a full reaction video of the entire game if you would like to see more of it. If you like this video and you want to see more of what I do, please subscribe because I'm hoping to make more content this year, and I have links to other stuff I'm up to in the description and other ways that you can support me. Also, do go follow my brothers. Their links are in the description too. James is an excellent writer, and Fraser is playing video games and streaming them, so you can go check them out as well. That's all from me. May the light of blessing grant you the strength you seek. Go make video games.